Instead of keeping his phone by his bed, he placed it in another room and bought an old-fashioned alarm clock. This single change forced him to make a conscious decision each morning about when and how he would engage with the digital world. The first morning without his phone was revelatory. For 20 minutes after waking, he experienced something he hadn't felt in years: mental quiet. No notifications demanding immediate attention, no news alerts triggering anxiety about events he couldn't control, no social media posts making him feel inadequate about his life. Just silence and the opportunity to notice his own thoughts without external interference. Dr. Amanda Torres, a neuroscientist who had studied attention and addiction for 15 years, explained why this seemingly simple change was so powerful. When you remove the external stimuli that your brain has become dependent on for dopamine, you create space for your natural reward systems to recalibrate. Most people have been living in a state of constant overstimulation for so long that they've forgotten what mental peace feels like. That mental peace, Marcus discovered, was the foundation for everything else. In those quiet morning moments, he began to hear the voice that had been drowned out by years of noise, his own authentic desires, values, and priorities. The system works so hard to keep you externally focused because internal focus inevitably leads to questions that threaten its control. What do I actually want? What brings me genuine satisfaction? What kind of person do I want to become? These questions are dangerous to the system because they lead to answers that can't be purchased. Authentic purpose can't be bought. Genuine relationships can't be consumed. Real strength can't be outsourced. Self-respect can't be delivered to your door in 2 days with free shipping. Marcus realized that his weakness hadn't been a personal failing. It had been a carefully cultivated product. Every aspect of his environment had been designed to make him weaker, more dependent, more profitable. His job kept him sitting for 8 hours a day, weakening his body and spirit. His commute isolated him in traffic, preventing community connection. His entertainment options were designed to be passively consumed rather than actively created. His food came pre-processed, removing any connection to its source or preparation. The process of breaking free required systematically identifying each area where the system had made him dependent and developing the capability to meet those needs independently. This wasn't about becoming completely self-sufficient. Humans are naturally interdependent, but about choosing your dependencies consciously rather than having them imposed upon you by systems designed for profit rather than flourishing. He started with his body, recognizing that physical weakness made him vulnerable to every other form of manipulation. When your body is weak, your mind becomes weak. When your mind is weak, your will becomes weak. When your will is weak, you become profitable. The fitness industry had convinced him that strength required expensive memberships, specialized equipment, and complex programs designed by experts. But humans had been developing functional strength for thousands of years using only their body weight and basic tools. He began with simple movements, push-ups, squats, and walks, gradually building the physical foundation that would support everything else. The change wasn't just physical. As his body grew stronger, his relationship with discomfort transformed. Exercise taught him that temporary discomfort could lead to permanent improvement, that his initial resistance to challenge was often misguided, and that he was capable of far more than he had believed. These lessons extended far beyond the physical realm. Lisa Chen, a former marketing executive who had transformed her life through similar principles, described the psychological shift. When you prove to yourself that you can master physical discomfort voluntarily, you realize that most of the mental and emotional discomfort in your life is also voluntary. You've been choosing weakness because it felt easier in the moment, but you start to see that strength actually feels better in the long run. Marcus then turned his attention to his relationship with food, recognizing that industrial food systems had made him dependent on products designed for profit rather than nourishment. The processed food industry had convinced him that cooking was difficult, time-consuming, and unnecessary when convenient alternatives were available. But convenient alternatives came with hidden costs, not just financial, but biological and psychological. Learning to prepare his own food became an act of rebellion against systems designed to keep him weak and dependent. Cooking required him to slow down, plan ahead, and connect with the basic process of nourishment. It removed him from marketing algorithms designed to trigger impulse purchases and connected him with the simple satisfaction of meeting his own needs through his own capability. The changes were immediate and profound. Home-cooked meals provided stable energy throughout the day rather than the blood sugar roller coaster of processed foods. Planning and preparing meals required mindfulness and presence rather than the mindless consumption that characterized most of his eating. The money saved by cooking at home provided financial breathing room that reduced stress and increased options. But the most significant change was psychological. Each meal he prepared for himself was evidence that he could meet his own needs, that he wasn't dependent on corporate systems to survive, that he possessed capabilities that consumer culture had convinced him he didn't have. Financial independence became the next battleground. Marcus realized that debt wasn't just a financial burden, it was a form of control that limited his choices and forced him to remain profitable to creditors. Every dollar of debt was a vote for his future weakness, a commitment to remain dependent on systems he might prefer to leave. The financial system had convinced him that debt was normal, even beneficial, that credit was a tool for building wealth rather than a trap for extracting it. But debt primarily benefits lenders, not borrowers. It allows banks to profit from your future labor while limiting your present freedom. The heavily indebted person cannot afford to take risks, change careers, or challenge systems that exploit them because their monthly obligations require steady income from acceptable sources. Breaking free financially required a fundamental shift in perspective. Instead of focusing on increasing income to support increasing consumption, he focused on decreasing consumption to require less income. Instead of viewing luxuries as rewards for hard work, he began seeing them as potential traps that could limit future freedom. This wasn't about living in deprivation. It was about distinguishing between genuine needs and manufactured wants. Most modern needs are actually wants created by marketing systems designed to extract money from psychological vulnerabilities. The need for status symbols, convenience products, and entertainment subscriptions are all artificial needs that can be eliminated without reducing quality of life and often while improving it. David Kim, an accountant who had eliminated $85,000 in consumer debt over 3 years, explained the mental shift. I realized that every payment I made to creditors was money that couldn't be used for freedom. Every dollar of debt was a vote for my future weakness. Every payment was time I'd have to spend making money for other people instead of building something meaningful for myself. Marcus began tracking every expense, not to restrict himself, but to become conscious of where his money was actually going. The results were shocking. Nearly 40% of his income was going to subscriptions, convenience purchases, and impulse buys that provided minimal value to his life. These weren't conscious choices. They were the result of millions of micro-decisions influenced by systems designed to separate him from his money with minimal awareness. By eliminating expenses that didn't align with his authentic values and priorities, he discovered that he needed far less money to live well than he had believed. This realization was liberating because it meant he needed to sell far less of his time and energy to sustain his lifestyle. Lower required income meant greater flexibility, more options, and increased ability to make choices based on values rather than financial pressure. Mental independence proved to be the most challenging battlefield because the systems designed to control your thinking are invisible and operate below the level of conscious awareness. The media you consume, the conversations you're exposed to, and the information you receive are all carefully curated to produce specific thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that serve someone else's interests rather than your own. Marcus began by creating what he called information fasting, periods of time when he deliberately avoided all external information sources to allow his own thoughts and priorities to emerge without external influence. This practice revealed how much of what he had considered his own thinking was actually recycled ideas from media sources designed to keep him anxious, divided, and distracted. Robert Hayes, a cognitive scientist who studied media manipulation, explained the psychological mechanism. Most people believe they're thinking independently while actually operating with mental frameworks that have been carefully constructed by others. The goal of modern media isn't to inform you, it's to make you think specific thoughts that lead to specific behaviors that benefit specific interests. The solution wasn't to find better media sources, but to develop independent thinking capabilities that could evaluate information rather than simply consume it. This required learning to distinguish between information designed to help you understand reality and information designed to manipulate your behavior. Marcus began reading primary sources rather than interpretations, studying history and philosophy to develop frameworks for independent analysis, and practicing what he called perspective discipline, actively seeking viewpoints that challenged his existing beliefs to prevent intellectual stagnation. The transformation wasn't just personal, it was relational. As Marcus became stronger, more independent, and clearer in his thinking, his relationships naturally evolved. Some relationships, built primarily on shared weakness and mutual validation of limiting beliefs, naturally fell away. Others deepened as he brought more authenticity, strength, and clarity to his interactions. Sarah Williams, a therapist who specialized in personal development, observed this pattern repeatedly. When someone begins developing genuine strength and independence, their social circle naturally reorganizes. People who are primarily connected to your weakness have less to relate to, while people who appreciate strength and growth become more attracted to your energy. The most surprising discovery was that becoming stronger didn't make Marcus less compassionate, it made him more capable of genuine help rather than enabling weakness in others. When you're operating from strength rather than weakness, you can offer real support rather than shared misery. You can model possibility rather than commiserating about limitations. Romantic relationships transformed completely. Instead of seeking partners to complete him or fill emotional gaps, Marcus began attracting and being attracted to people who were on similar journeys towards strength and independence. The relationship dynamics shifted from mutual need and dependency to mutual growth and inspiration. Career decisions became clearer as external pressures diminished. Instead of accepting jobs based primarily on salary and status, he could evaluate opportunities based on alignment with his values, contribution to his development, and positive impact on the world. Financial independence created career independence, which led to work that felt meaningful rather than merely profitable. The most profound realization was that destroying his weak self didn't mean becoming harsh, uncaring, or disconnected. It meant developing the strength to be authentically caring rather than performing care for social approval, to be genuinely helpful rather than enabling dysfunction, and to live according to his deepest values rather than external expectations. The process wasn't linear or easy. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, and times when the old patterns reasserted themselves. But each challenge became an opportunity to develop greater strength, clarity, and independence. Each obstacle overcome increased his confidence in his ability to handle whatever life presented. Marcus discovered that the system's greatest weapon wasn't external force. It was convincing him that he was naturally weak, that independence was impossible, that he needed external systems to survive and thrive. Breaking free required proving to himself through consistent action that these beliefs were false. The man who destroys his weak self becomes truly indestructible, because he no longer depends on external circumstances for his sense of worth, security, or purpose. He develops internal resources that cannot be taken away by economic downturns, social changes, or personal setbacks. He becomes dangerous to systems that require weakness for profit and inspiring to individuals seeking their own path to freedom. Part 3. The Unbreakable Man. 2 years had passed since Marcus began his systematic dismantling of the weak self that the system had cultivated within him. The transformation was so complete that colleagues from his previous life wouldn't recognize the man he had become. The anxious, distracted, financially dependent person scrolling through his phone at 3 a.m. had been replaced by someone who woke each morning with purpose, energy, and unshakable inner direction. But the most remarkable change wasn't visible from the outside. The truly revolutionary transformation had occurred in his relationship with reality itself. He had developed what could only be described as anti-fragility, the ability not just to withstand stress, difficulty, and chaos, but to grow stronger because of them. Every challenge had become fuel for further development, rather than evidence of his limitations. The morning routine that began with removing his phone from his bedroom had evolved into a comprehensive daily practice of intentional strength building. He woke without an alarm, his body naturally attuned to rhythms that had been disrupted for decades by artificial light and screen time. Marcus stared at his phone screen, the blue light casting an eerie glow across his face at 2:47 a.m. Another night lost to the endless scroll. Another morning that would arrive with regret and exhaustion. The notification badges called to him like sirens. 17 unread messages, 43 likes on yesterday's post, and a breaking news alert about something that would be forgotten by noon. He knew he should sleep, but the dopamine hits kept coming, each one weaker than the last, requiring longer sessions to achieve the same fleeting satisfaction. This scene plays out in millions of homes every night. Marcus represents the modern human condition, trapped in systems designed not to serve his highest good, but to extract maximum value from his attention, energy, and resources. He doesn't realize that every swipe, every click, every purchase decision has been carefully orchestrated by algorithms trained to exploit the deepest vulnerabilities of the human psyche. The modern economic system operates on a fundamental principle that would shock most people if they truly understood it. Your weakness is their profit. The weaker you are, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, the more money you generate for the machine. A strong, self-sufficient individual is the system's worst nightmare because they consume less, need less validation, resist manipulation, and think independently. Consider the mathematics of modern consumption. The average American encounters over 5,000 advertisements per day, each one carefully crafted by teams of psychologists and data scientists to trigger specific emotional responses. These aren't random messages, they're precision-guided missiles aimed at your insecurities, desires, and fears. The lonely person sees ads for dating apps and social experiences. The insecure person encounters beauty products and status symbols. The anxious person finds medications and calming products. Instead of accepting the gradual decline that modern culture presents as inevitable aging, he had developed strength, endurance, and physical capability that exceeded his teenage years. But more importantly, physical training had taught him the fundamental principle that underlies all genuine strength: voluntary discomfort in service of long-term benefit. Every workout was practice in choosing temporary difficulty to achieve permanent improvement. This principle, once mastered physically, naturally extended to every other area of life. James Rodriguez, a former Marine who had transitioned to teaching natural movement and strength, explained the deeper significance. Physical training isn't really about the body. It's about the will. When you prove to yourself repeatedly that you can choose discomfort voluntarily, you realize that most of life's challenges are just different forms of the same test. Can you do what's right even when it's difficult? Financial independence had progressed from debt elimination to true economic freedom. Marcus no longer needed to sell his time to anyone who didn't align with his values because his needs could be met through multiple income streams he had developed, savings he had accumulated, and skills he had acquired that provided value independently of traditional employment. This freedom hadn't come through getting rich in the conventional sense. It had come through redefining wealth as the ability to make choices based on values rather than financial pressure. By dramatically reducing his needs through conscious living, he had achieved something more valuable than high income: complete autonomy over his time and energy. The business he had started solving problems he genuinely cared about had grown not through traditional marketing techniques designed to manipulate customers, but through creating genuine value for people working toward their own freedom and strength. His customers weren't seeking quick fixes or easy solutions. They were investing in their own development and independence. Maria Santos, an economist who studied alternative economic models, had identified this as a crucial pattern. The old economy is built on exploitation of weakness. They're selling people things they don't need to solve problems that consumption created. The emerging economy is built on genuine value creation, helping people develop capabilities that serve their authentic interests rather than manufactured desires. This new economic model aligned perfectly with Marcus's values because it required him to be genuinely helpful rather than manipulatively profitable. Success came through developing real solutions to actual problems rather than manufacturing artificial needs to sell unnecessary products. The more capable and independent his customers became, the more successful his business grew. Relationships had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation. Marcus now attracted and was attracted to people who were also on journeys towards strength, independence, and authentic living. Friendships were based on mutual growth and genuine care rather than shared complaints and validation of limitations. Romantic relationships involved two complete people choosing to build something together rather than two incomplete people trying to use each other to feel whole. The most surprising discovery was that becoming truly strong had made him more loving, not less. When you're operating from abundance rather than scarcity, you can give generously without depleting yourself. When you're secure in your own worth, you don't need others to validate you, which allows you to appreciate them for who they actually are rather than what they can do for you. Dr. Helen Chang, a relationship therapist who studied healthy relationship dynamics, had observed this pattern repeatedly. Strong people create strong relationships because they're not trying to extract anything from others. They're bringing their whole selves to interactions rather than looking for others to fill gaps in their self-concept. This creates entirely different relationship dynamics based on growth rather than need. Career decisions now flowed from internal clarity rather than external pressure. Instead of accepting work based primarily on income and status, Marcus could evaluate opportunities based on their alignment with his values, their contribution to his development, and their positive impact on the world. Financial independence had created career independence, which had led to work that felt like expression rather than exploitation. The consulting he did for individuals and organizations seeking to develop genuine strength and independence felt less like work and more like mission. He was helping others break free from the same systems that had once controlled him, sharing knowledge and strategies that could liberate people from dependency on systems that profited from their weakness. Mental independence had deepened into something approaching wisdom. Marcus had developed the ability to think clearly about complex issues without being swayed by emotional manipulation, social pressure, or information designed to trigger specific responses. He could evaluate political positions, economic proposals, and social movements based on their actual merits rather than their emotional appeal or tribal associations. This mental clarity had come through years of practicing what he called intellectual honesty, the commitment to follow evidence and logic even when they led to conclusions that contradicted his preferences or challenged his existing beliefs. He had learned to hold his own opinions lightly, always ready to update them based on new information or better reasoning. Professor David Kim, a philosopher who studied critical thinking and rational decision-making, explained why this capability was so rare and valuable. Most people's opinions are essentially tribal signals rather than carefully considered positions. They adopt beliefs that signal membership in desired groups rather than beliefs that accurately represent reality. The person who can think independently of social pressure has access to reality in ways that most people don't. This access to reality, unfiltered by social pressure and emotional manipulation, had become Marcus's greatest asset in navigating an increasingly complex and deceptive world. While others were distracted by manufactured controversies and artificial divisions, he could focus on what actually mattered and what could actually be influenced. The spiritual dimension of his transformation had been perhaps the most unexpected. Not spiritual in any religious sense, but spiritual in terms of connecting with something larger than his immediate personal concerns. As he had become stronger and more independent, he had naturally become more interested in contributing to others' development and to positive change in the world. This wasn't the result of moral obligation or social pressure. It emerged naturally from strength and abundance. When your own needs are met through your own capabilities, you have energy and resources available to help others. When you're not constantly worried about your own survival and status, you can focus on contribution and meaning. Rachel Green, a researcher who studied purpose and meaning in life, had identified this as a predictable pattern. People who develop genuine strength and independence almost always become more generous and socially conscious, not less. It's insecurity and weakness that make people selfish and fearful. Strength creates the capacity for genuine generosity. The challenges that had once seemed overwhelming now appeared as opportunities for further growth. Economic uncertainty became a chance to test and improve his self-sufficiency. Social conflict became an opportunity to practice maintaining his values under pressure. Personal setbacks became data for refining his strategies and deepening his resilience. This relationship with challenges represented perhaps the most fundamental shift in his psychology. Instead of seeking comfort and avoiding difficulty, he had learned to see challenges as the raw material for strength development. Difficulties weren't obstacles to happiness. They were the mechanisms through which happiness was earned and maintained. The system that had once controlled him through offering artificial solutions to manufactured problems no longer held any power over his choices. Advertisements triggered amusement rather than desire because he could see through their manipulation techniques. Social pressure felt irrelevant because his self-worth came from internal standards rather than external approval. Political and media manipulation seemed transparent because he understood the psychological techniques being used. Most importantly, he had become truly dangerous to systems that required weakness for profit. A man who could meet his own needs, think his own thoughts, regulate his own emotions, and maintain his own purpose couldn't be controlled through the usual methods. He had become what every exploitative system fears most, a genuinely independent human being. But perhaps the greatest gift of his transformation was the realization that this path was available to anyone willing to undertake the journey. The weakness that the system had cultivated wasn't his natural state. It had been carefully created through environmental design, social conditioning, and psychological manipulation. What had been created could be uncreated. What had been learned could be unlearned. The man who destroys his weak self discovers something that the system desperately doesn't want him to know. He was never actually weak. He had simply been convinced to abandon his natural strength through systems designed to profit from his dependency. Reconnecting with that natural strength required only removing the artificial barriers that prevented its expression. Marcus now spent his time helping others discover their own path to the same freedom. Not by selling them products or services, but by showing them what was possible when someone committed fully to their own development and independence. The strongest gift he could give was living proof that the system's control was optional, that genuine freedom was achievable, and that the weak self could indeed be destroyed and replaced with something unbreakable. The journey continued, but with a fundamental difference. Instead of seeking strength to escape problems, he had developed strength that transformed problems into opportunities. Instead of pursuing independence to avoid responsibility, he had achieved independence that enabled greater responsibility. Instead of destroying weakness to become invulnerable, he had eliminated weakness to become genuinely caring. The unbreakable man wasn't someone who couldn't be hurt. He was someone who could be hurt without being broken, challenged without being defeated, or pressured without being controlled. He had become anti-fragile, not through avoiding stress, but through developing the capacity to grow stronger under pressure. In a world designed to keep people weak, dependent, and profitable, he had become living proof that another way was possible. He had broken free not through luck, privilege, or special circumstances, but through the systematic application of principles available to anyone willing to do the work. He had become both the person he was meant to be and the example that others could follow. The system would continue its attempts to create weakness, dependency, and control, but it would never again have power over someone who had discovered his own strength, developed his own independence, and committed fully to his own authentic path. The man who destroys his weak self becomes truly indestructible because he has removed everything that could be used to control him and developed everything needed to thrive independently. This was the ultimate rebellion, not fighting the system but transcending it completely by becoming too strong, too clear, and too independent to be controlled by anyone offering external solutions to internal challenges. He had become free not by changing the world, but by changing himself so completely that the world's attempts at control simply no longer applied. The journey from weakness to strength, from dependence to independence, from control to freedom was complete. But it was also just beginning, because true strength grows stronger through use, genuine independence enables greater contribution, and authentic freedom creates the foundation for helping others discover their own path to liberation from systems designed to profit from their weakness. Marcus had become living proof of the most dangerous truth the system could never acknowledge, that every human being possessed the capacity for genuine strength, authentic independence, and unshakable freedom. All that was required was the willingness to destroy the weak self that the system had so carefully cultivated, and to build in its place something that could never be destroyed by others because it was founded on truth rather than illusion, strength rather than dependency, and authentic choice rather than manufactured consent. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others because he has removed everything that could be used against him and developed everything needed to thrive independently. He has become, in the truest sense, unbreakable. The system reads you like a book and sells you exactly what your wounds crave. Sarah Chen, a former behavioral economist at one of Silicon Valley's largest tech companies, quit her six-figure job after realizing the true nature of her work. She had spent 3 years optimizing algorithms designed to keep users engaged longer, spending more, and returning more frequently. The breakthrough moment came when she analyzed user data and discovered a disturbing pattern. The platform's most profitable users were also the most psychologically distressed. The algorithm had learned to identify and target depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem because these emotional states made people more susceptible to engagement and purchase behaviors. "We weren't building a product," she later reflected in her resignation letter. "We were building a trap. The most successful feature wasn't the one that helped people connect or learn or grow. It was the one that made them feel inadequate enough to keep coming back for more." This revelation exposes the darker truth about modern digital platforms. They don't succeed by making your life better. They succeed by making you believe your life isn't good enough without them. The business model requires your dissatisfaction, your FOMO, your need for external validation. A truly content person who knows their worth doesn't generate revenue. The food industry operates on similar principles. Ultra-processed foods aren't designed for nutrition or satisfaction. They're engineered for overconsumption. Scientists in corporate labs spend millions of dollars identifying the exact combination of sugar, salt, and fat that will trigger what they call the bliss point, the precise formulation that makes it impossible to eat just one. These foods are designed to hijack your brain's reward system, creating cravings that can only be satisfied with more of the same product. Michael Rodriguez discovered this firsthand when he tried to quit his daily fast food habit. A software engineer earning $120,000 per year, he couldn't understand why he felt powerless against a $5 burger. The answer lay in the thousands of hours of research and testing that went into that burger's formulation. Every ingredient, from the bun's texture to the sauce's flavor profile, was optimized to trigger maximum craving with minimum satiation. The burger wasn't food. It was a drug delivery system designed to ensure he'd return tomorrow. The financial system represents perhaps the most sophisticated form of this exploitation. Credit cards, loans, and payment plans aren't primarily financial products. They're psychological manipulation tools designed to disconnect you from the reality of your spending. The easier it becomes to spend money you don't have on things you don't need, the weaker your financial position becomes, and the more profit the system extracts from your weakness. Jenny Williams, a marketing manager making $65,000 annually, found herself $40,000 in credit card debt despite never experiencing a financial emergency. The debt had accumulated gradually through 1,000 small purchases, subscription services she'd forgotten to cancel, convenient food deliveries during busy weeks, and impulse buys made easier by one-click purchasing and buy now, pay later options. Each transaction felt insignificant in the moment, but together they created a financial prison that would take years to escape. The genius of modern consumer debt is its invisibility. Unlike historical forms of bondage which were obvious and external, financial enslavement happens gradually and internally. The chains are made of convenience, comfort, and social pressure. You don't realize you're trapped until you try to break free and discover that your monthly obligations exceed your ability to live independently. Social media platforms have weaponized human psychology's most fundamental need: connection and validation. These platforms don't connect you with others. They connect you to a system designed to harvest your attention and data, while providing just enough social validation to keep you returning. The most insidious aspect is how they exploit your genuine desire for human connection while systematically undermining your ability to form deep, meaningful relationships. The average person now spends over 7 hours per day staring at screens, much of it on platforms designed to be addictive. This isn't an accident or an unfortunate side effect. It's the intended outcome. Former tech executives have publicly admitted that they designed these products to be as addictive as possible, using techniques borrowed from casinos and behavioral psychology. But the system's influence extends far beyond digital manipulation. It shapes your entire environment to encourage weakness and dependence. Modern urban design prioritizes car dependency over walkability, creating populations that are physically weaker and more reliant on fossil fuels. Educational systems emphasize compliance and standardized thinking over creativity and critical thinking, producing graduates who are excellent employees but poor independent thinkers. Medical systems focus on treating symptoms rather than addressing root causes, creating lifetime customers rather than healthy individuals. The housing market has been transformed into an investment vehicle that prioritizes profit over shelter, creating artificial scarcity and making home ownership increasingly impossible for average workers. This forces people into decades-long debt cycles or permanent rental relationships that transfer wealth from those who need shelter to those who already own property. The American dream of home ownership, once a path to financial independence, has become a tool of financial enslavement. Even entertainment has been weaponized against your independence. Streaming services, video games, and social platforms are designed to consume as much of your free time as possible, leaving little energy for personal development, skill building, or meaningful relationships. The goal isn't to entertain you, it's to prevent you from becoming someone who might threaten the system's control. This isn't conspiracy theory, it's business strategy. Every major corporation employs teams of behavioral scientists, data analysts, and psychologists whose job is to understand and exploit human weakness for profit. They study your habits, map your psychology, and design products specifically to exploit your vulnerabilities. The pharmaceutical industry represents perhaps the most extreme example of this dynamic. Rather than focusing primarily on cures or prevention, the industry has discovered that chronic conditions requiring lifelong treatment generate far more profit than one-time cures. Patients with diabetes generate an average of $16,750 in annual revenue for pharmaceutical companies, while a cured patient generates zero ongoing revenue. This creates perverse incentives that prioritize profit over healing. Jennifer Park, an internal medicine physician, became disillusioned after attending a continuing education seminar sponsored by a pharmaceutical company. The presentation focused not on patient outcomes but on patient lifetime value and strategies for ensuring treatment adherence to expensive medications. She realized that her medical training had been subtly influenced by an industry that profited from sickness rather than health. I went into medicine to heal people, she reflected years later. I gradually realized that the system I was part of had financial incentives that often aligned against actual healing. The sickest patients were the most profitable patients. This dynamic extends throughout the economy. Weak, dependent, confused, and insecure people are profitable. Strong, independent, clear-thinking, and confident people are threats to the business model. Understanding this fundamental truth is the first step toward breaking free from the system's control. The most sophisticated aspect of modern control systems is how they've convinced you that your weakness is natural, inevitable, or even desirable. Anxiety is normalized as a natural response to modern life, rather than recognized as often being the result of lifestyle choices and environmental factors. Physical weakness is accepted as the inevitable result of aging rather than the consequence of sedentary living. Financial struggle is framed as the result of not working hard enough, rather than the outcome of a system designed to extract maximum value from your labor while returning minimum compensation. The system has convinced you that solutions to your problems can only be found through consumption, buying products, services, or experiences that promise to fix what's wrong with your life. Feeling lonely? Buy access to a dating app. Feeling weak? Buy a gym membership you'll rarely use. Feeling unsuccessful? Buy courses, books, or coaching programs that promise to unlock your potential. What the system will never tell you is that most of the problems it claims to solve are problems it creates. The dating apps that promise to solve your loneliness actually make meaningful connection more difficult by gamifying human relationships and encouraging endless shopping for better options. The fitness industry that promises to solve your weakness often keeps you dependent on their products rather than teaching you to become truly self-sufficient. The self-help industry that promises to unlock your potential often creates more confusion and dependency rather than genuine growth. Marcus finally understood this at 3:15 a.m., still scrolling through his phone, when he encountered an advertisement for a productivity app promising to help him optimize his sleep schedule. The irony struck him like lightning. Here he was, destroying his sleep by consuming content designed to sell him a solution to the very problem that content consumption was creating. The system was simultaneously poisoning him and selling him the antidote. That moment of clarity marked the beginning of his journey toward freedom. But understanding the problem is only the first step. The real work lies in systematically dismantling the system's control over your life and rebuilding yourself according to your own values rather than the market's demands. The modern world offers you 1,000 different ways to remain weak, dependent, and profitable. It offers very few paths to genuine strength, independence, and freedom. This isn't an accident. It's the natural result of economic systems that profit from your weakness. The only way to break free is to recognize that your strength is your rebellion, your independence is your revolution, and your clarity is your greatest weapon against a system designed to keep you confused, dependent, and profitable. Part 2. The Alchemy of Destruction and Rebirth. The alarm rang at 5 a.m., cutting through the darkness like a blade through silk. Marcus had been awake for 3 minutes already, lying in bed and feeling the familiar weight of dread settle into his chest. For 34 years, he had awakened each morning with the same question echoing in his mind: is this all there is? Today, that question would receive a different answer. He sat up in bed and looked around his apartment, the accumulation of 3 decades of consumer choices that had never led to satisfaction, the expensive television that had promised better entertainment experiences but delivered only endless distraction, the designer clothes hanging in his closet that had promised confidence but delivered only temporary validation. The kitchen gadgets that had promised culinary adventure but collected dust while he ordered takeout from his phone. Each object represented a moment when he had believed that external acquisition could solve internal problems. Each purchase had been a small act of surrendering his power to the system's promise that happiness could be bought, that problems could be solved through consumption, that identity could be purchased rather than developed. The revelation that had struck him during his late-night scrolling session 3 weeks ago had been growing stronger each day. The system didn't want him to be strong, independent, or genuinely happy because strong, independent, happy people don't consume compulsively. They don't need constant validation, endless entertainment, or quick fixes to emotional problems. They threaten the entire business model of modern capitalism, which requires weakness, insecurity, and dependence to function. But understanding the problem intellectually and actually breaking free from it are entirely different challenges. The system's tentacles reach deep into every aspect of modern life, from the food you eat to the thoughts you think. Breaking free requires more than just changing a few habits. It requires fundamentally restructuring your relationship with reality itself. Marcus began with what seemed like the smallest change but would prove to be the most significant. He decided to create intentional friction between himself and the system's most addictive products. The first hour of each day belonged entirely to him. No external inputs, no demands on his attention, no reactive responses to other people's priorities. In that hour of silence, he had reconnected with capacities that most adults believe they've lost forever. The ability to sit quietly without distraction or boredom. The capacity to generate ideas and solve problems through internal reflection rather than external research. The skill of emotional regulation through breath and mindfulness rather than entertainment and consumption. Patricia Morgan, a psychiatrist who studied resilience and mental strength, had observed similar transformations in patients who successfully broke free from modern dependency systems. When you remove the external scaffolding that most people use to manage their emotional and mental states, you're forced to develop internal capabilities that are far more reliable and powerful. The person who can regulate their emotional state internally can never be controlled by anyone offering external emotional regulation. This internal emotional regulation had become Marcus's greatest asset in a world designed to keep people reactive, anxious, and dependent on external validation. Political news that once triggered hours of worry and argument now provided simply information to consider and dismiss if not actionable. Social media posts that might have induced comparison and inadequacy now seem transparent in their manipulation techniques. Economic uncertainty that previously caused panic now represented simply another problem to solve with available resources. The physical transformation had continued far beyond basic fitness. Marcus had discovered that the human body, properly trained and nourished, was capable of far more than the medical and fitness industries suggested.